Hi, in this lesson we are going to talk about how to find different types of isotopes and also how to figure out if the problem has any points of discontinuity. First, let's start with isotope. Isotopes are going to be drawn in with dashed lines. Now, an isotope is kind of like a boundary, a curve of the rational function will get really close to it and then follow it along as it approaches to either positive infinity or negative infinity. So as it either goes to the left side, to the right side, or if it's going up or if it's going down. Now, there are three different types of isotopes. They're listed here on the side. The first one is called a horizontal isotope. So you would be drawing a dashed line horizontally, and all horizontal lines are in the form of y equals a number. So your answer for a horizontal isotope, I'm going to use HA for horizontal, could be something like this. Y equals -2, y equals 10, y equals 1. A vertical isotope is where you go up and down. And vertical lines always look like x equals a number. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to do VA, and you could have x equals 4, or x equals 10, x equals 0, something like that. A slant is going to be a diagonal line. So as you see here in the second picture, a diagonal line going across. Diagonal lines will always look like y equals mx plus b. And then it says some more here, but we'll get to that later at the bottom part. But those are the three types. And the other thing you need to know is that you will never have a horizontal and a slant at the same time. It's either one or the other. So now if we go to the next topic, which is the points of discontinuity, or a hole in the graph or a gap in the graph. I mean, if you look at the picture off to the side, you're going to notice I have a lovely little curve, and I have these two little red arrows right here pointing to a little hole. So if you remember in the beginning part of the unit, when we worked on the restrictions, we would say like x could not equal 4. Well, that's kind of where the hole would be at. If it's a point, I'm going to use POD for points of discontinuity. If it's a point, it must look like an ordered pair. So you have to have an x value and you have to have a y value. So if I was looking at this lovely little picture over here, my POD, the x value is what they're calling A, and the y value is what they're calling L. And that's what you would list out. Now, the only time you have a point of discontinuity is if you can cancel out something in the problem. So once you GCF or factor and you're able to cancel something out, then you will have a point of discontinuity. If you can't cancel anything out, then you don't have it. So now let's go look at the isotopes. Well, how do we find those? The first one is vertical, and we're going to go back to our fun topic of factoring and GCF. So factor GCF, the top and the bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the denominator for the vertical. And on the denominator, you're going to set it equal to 0 and solve. So for example, if I had x plus 5 on the bottom of this fraction, over here I'd be thinking, all right, I'm going to take x plus 5, set it equal to 0, move the 5 over, so x equals -5. And that would be my answer. Horizontal isotopes, 3 different things could occur. Now, to figure out which one of these 3 you're looking at, we look at the degree, which degree is just a fancy way of saying highest exponent. So I want you to compare the highest exponent on the numerator and the highest exponent on the denominator. So if I gave you a problem that looked like this, x to the 6th over x to the 4th. So when you look at this problem, the exponent on the top is 6, the exponent on the bottom is 4, and 6 is bigger than 4. So that's where we get top heavy, because the top one is bigger than the bottom one. And if it's top heavy, it says there is no horizontal asymptote. Instead, you will have a slant. I'll get to that in a minute, but if it's top heavy, no horizontal, you will have a slant. Okay, now what if it was flipped? So on this one, what if you had x to the 4th on top, and on the bottom you had x to the 5th? So now when you look at this one, do you agree that the bottom one is bigger than the top one? So if the bottom one is bigger, that's what we call a bottom heavy. Bottom heavy does have a horizontal asymptote, and it's always y equals 0. So your answer for that one is just y equals 0. Okay, then what if we had x to the 7th, let's go 2x to the 7th, over x to the 7th. Now, when you look at these exponents, you have a 7 on top, 7 on bottom, so they're equal, they're the same. So if they're equal or the same, then you will have a horizontal asymptote, and it's going to be the coefficient over coefficient. So what's in front of x to the 7th on the top? Well, that is a 2. What's in front of the x to the 7th on the bottom? Well, if there's not a number listed, that's a 1. So you would have 2 over 1, which is just y equals 2. Now remember, slant, we said slant only occurred if it was top heavy. And for slant, we're going to use a synthetic division. Remember, our answer has to look like y equals mx plus b. And super key point right here, you get to ignore the remainder. Okay, so if I had something that looked like this, remember synthetic division, we have a little corner box. We're going to have a number listed here. Then we're going to list out our coefficients up here. And then we're going to go through and we're going to get some numbers, just totally making these up. And then you go, oh, I get to ignore the remainder. The first part is your mx. The second part is your b. So in this problem, you would say y equals 1x plus 2. All right, on the back side of your notes are just a bunch of example problems we're going to go through. The first thing I would do with every single problem is I would work on factoring or GCF the top and the bottom. So on example number 1, can't do anything with x on the top. But on the bottom, you should notice that you can take out a GCF. So that would be x parentheses x plus 2. Then hopefully you notice, oh look, these x's right here will cancel out, which will leave me, don't forget, the x on top still has a coefficient of 1 over x plus 2. All right, so now I get to go through and start listing all my fun stuff. So vertical asymptote, we look at the denominator, and you are going to pretend like you set it equal to 0. So then you would get x equals -2. HA versus SA. So let's compare the exponents. I like to go back to the original problem because I think that's the easiest to find the exponents. So on top, the exponent is 1. The highest exponent on the bottom is 2. So this one is bottom heavy. Just writing that for our knowledge. Okay, so if it's bottom heavy, just flip your paper back over. You're going to say, oh, it does have an HA. So I'll kind of scroll here so you can see it. Bottom heavy does have an HA, and it is always y equals 0. So remember, if there's an HA, there's no SA. So there is no slant on this one. So no SA slant asymptote. Okay. Let me write that S a little better. So no slant, I'll just put it that way. All right, now to have a POD, something had to cancel out. Oh, we canceled out something, so we have a POD. Okay, to work on a POD, remember it has to be an ordered pair as your final answer. To help you get the X value, you look at what you canceled out. We canceled out just X. So if I was to solve that, I would say X equals 0, which is just the answer of 0. Now what you want to do is you want to plug in, so we want to plug in 0 on what we had left, not the original problem, but what we had left when we simplified it, which was 1 over x plus 2. So then what I want to do is I want to take this 0, plug it in right here for x. So we're looking at 1 over 0 plus 2, which gives me 1 over 2. So the ordered pair for my POD is 0, comma, half. All right, let's try another one. I can't do anything with 1 on the top. I'm going to leave that alone. But on the bottom, I can fast factor because it's a 1x squared. So what multiplies for -3 that adds for -2? And I would say -3 and +1. Okay, now I look to see if anything cancels. And hopefully when you look at this problem, you say nothing cancels. So if nothing cancels, there's no POD. Okay, so now I'm just going to go with VA. And this time you should notice that there are 2 x's on the bottom. So I'm going to have to solve each x and get 2 different answers. So I'd have x equals +3 and x equals -1. So now I want to compare my exponents. So remember, go back to the original problem. If there's no x on top, you can think of that as being x to the 0 power because there's no x's. So if I compare these, once again, I'm looking at a bottom heavy because 2 on the bottom is bigger than the 0 on the top. And if it's bottom heavy, then it's going to have an HA, and it's always going to be y equals 0. Done. Okay, third one. I'm going to factor the top, fast factor. So x, let's see, what multiplies for 2 that adds for 3? So that would be x plus 2 and x plus 1 all over x minus 2. Remember, the x minus 2 isn't necessarily in parentheses on the bottom, but you can think of it as being in parentheses. Once again, nothing cancels out. Okay, +2 and -2 are different, so no POD. And if we do the vertical, we're looking at just the bottom. So on the bottom, I would say x minus 2 equals 0, so x equals +2. Now, if I go back and compare my exponents, the highest exponent on top is 2. The highest exponent on bottom is 1. So this time, is everybody okay by saying we are top heavy? So if I go back here, top heavy says no horizontal. Instead, we have a slant. Okay. So I'm going to do SA for slant asymptote. All right. So now we got to remember synthetic division. So in synthetic division, you're going to put a little number in the corner box. And the number that goes in the corner box is always your VA number. So this number right here goes here. And then across here, I want you to look at the top and I want you to list out the coefficients. And I mean of the original problem. So I'm talking up here. So in front of x squared is 1, in front of x is 3, and the plane number is 2. Drop your first term, multiply. So 1 times 2 is 2. Now add. 3 plus 2 is 5. Multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. And 10 plus 2 is 12. But remember, it says do not use the remainder. So I get to cross off the remainder. And then the first part is my mx, and the second part is my b. So my answer would be y equals 1x plus 5. Or you could just say x plus 5. That doesn't look like a very good one. Almost looks like a 7. So let me try that again. All right. Then we're just going to keep practicing more and more. That's what we're doing. On the fourth one, I can't do anything with the top, so I'm going to leave it alone. But on the bottom, I can take out a GCF, which gives me 3x squared minus 1. And then hopefully you're saying, ooh, x squared minus 1, that can be factored. I can remember difference of squares. So you're going to have 1 plus, 1 minus, and the same number that multiplies for 1 is 1 and 1. Then I always say, does something cancel out? And hopefully you're going to say, why, yes, it does. This x minus 1 and this x minus 1 cancel out. So I'm really looking at, and I'm going to write it up here. If I get rid of everything on the top, I'm still left with 1. And then on the bottom, I have 3 parentheses x plus 1. Because something canceled out, I will have a POD on this one. Okay. So anyway, let's get to VA. So VA, let's look at what we have left on the bottom, which is x plus 1. Don't pay attention to the 3. The 3 does not have an x with it, so ignore it. So x plus 1, if I solve that, I get x equals negative 1. Compare your exponents. So the top exponent is 1. The bottom exponent is 2. So this time we are bottom heavy. If we're bottom heavy, you will have an HA, and it is always 0. So remember, if you have an HA, then there is no SA, so no slant. POD. So look at what you canceled out. What did we cancel out? We canceled out x minus 1. So if I set it equal to 0, then I would get x equals positive 1. Okay, now what you're going to do is take that and plug it in to what you had left, which is up here in green. So I'm going to go 1 over 3 parentheses, and right here instead of x, plug in 1, so 1 plus 1. So if I work this out, it's 1 over 3 times 1 plus 1 is 2, so you're looking at 1 over 6. So my answer for POD is the ordered pair 1 comma a sixth. All right, let's keep rolling. 3x squared minus 1 is not factorable. Can't do anything with that, so I'm going to leave that alone. On the bottom, I can take out a GCF. So if I take out a GCF, I get x parentheses x minus 6. Nothing cancels out, so there's no POD because nothing cancels out. Now I'm going to do my vertical asymptote. Now there are 2 x's on this one, so I'm going to go outside x equals 0, which is already solved. And then the inside one, if I switch negative 6, it becomes positive 6. Let's go compare our exponents. The highest exponent on top and bottom, you should notice, is the same. They are equal. They are both 2. So if it's equal, it will have an HA, and it's coefficient over coefficient. So on the top in front of x squared is a 3. On the bottom in front of x squared would be a 1. So 3 over 1 is just 3. And that will be your answer for that one. Okay, the next one. Take out a GCF of an x on the top. So you have x parentheses x plus 8. On the bottom, you can fast factor. So you're going to have a what multiplies for negative 8 that adds for 7. So hopefully you're going to do x plus 8, x minus 1. And once again, you're going to look at this one and say, oh, I do notice now something cancels out. So I'm left with, x plus 8 canceled out. So I'm left with x over x minus 1. So this one will have a POD because something canceled out. So vertical on the bottom, x minus 1 equals 0, so x equals positive 1. Compare your exponents to 2. They are equal. If they are equal, it is an HA, and it's coefficient over coefficient. So that would be 1 over 1, which is just 1. POD. So let's look at what we canceled out. We canceled out an x plus 8. So if I set that equal to 0, x would equal negative 8. Then I'm going to go back to what I had left over, which is here in green. And for each x, I'm going to plug in a negative 8, which works out to negative 8 over negative 9, which the two negatives become positive. So the ordered pair is negative 8, comma, 8/9. Okay, last row. We're going to do number 7 together, and then I would like you to pause the video and try 8 and 9 on your own. So on number 7, factor the top, and the top will factor, multiply for negative 4, add for 3. So that would be x plus 4x minus 1 over x plus 3. Nothing cancels out, so no POD. So VA, look at the bottom. So x equals negative 3. Compare your exponents. Top has exponent of 2, bottom has exponent of 1. So this time we're top. And if we're top heavy, remember that's no horizontal, that is a slant. Okay. So in the corner box goes your answer for x, which is your VA number, which is negative 3. Go back up here to the original problem and list out your coefficients. So 1, 3, and negative 4. And drop your first one. Multiply. Add for 0. Multiply. Add for negative 4, but remainder doesn't matter. So here's my mx and my b. So y equals 1x plus 0. Do I have to write plus 0? No. Do I have to write the 1 in front of the x? No. And you're done. So you try the next ones. Okay, hopefully you got them.